Yes. Would that look better for you if the light was off? So you can see the effect of the light.
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So this is our visual aid for today. Like I said, awesome technology that we can use to illustrate the concept of broad and short light. Okay. So the reason I brought this is because it is three-dimensional, yes?
Yeah.
And it is rectangular, okay? So too are our bodies. Isn't that weird? Okay, so if you think about like my shoulders here would be equivalent to like the top of this rectangle here, yes? Okay, my height here, width, okay? If I turn sideways, are we seeing the comparison?
Yes.
Okay? Our faces and our heads are also the same, except they're perpendicular. So if this is my body, okay, my head doesn't go like this, it actually goes like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so like this is the comparison to my head. The narrow part of my head, the broad part of my head. Yes? You all on board?
Yeah.
Okay. When we talk about broad and short light, we're referring to the short part or the broad part of either a head or a body. Does that make sense so far? Okay. Why would you want to broad and short light somebody? Okay. I'm going to speak in very, very general senses here. Okay. This is like a generalization type thing. In general, when we light the short part of something, it makes that thing appear thinner. When we light the broad side of something, it makes that thing appear broader. Okay? So, you need to, when we focus on, in this unit, when we focus on taking portraits, okay, we want to be able to portray our subject in whatever way is most flattering to them, or whatever way they want their personality to come across, which might mean that we need them to appear broader and more powerful or more masculine or more dominant in their space, or we might need to portray them the opposite way, like they are thinner or more, I don't want to say weaker.
Less powerful.
Less powerful, yes. More feminine sometimes that can come across. So there's all sorts of connotations for what those two different looks might mean, okay? The artist part of what you're doing is how to interpret those different connotations and how to communicate those different connotations as they apply to the subject that you are photographing, okay? It's a big responsibility photographing somebody, okay? So broad and short light works like this. I started this yesterday, right before the bell rang, and then I got all annoyed.
Hand overexposed.
That's okay. So when our light is straight on, okay, or as straight on as I can get to the camera right now, and I'm talking right to the camera because that's where the biggest impact is going to be, so you can watch it on playback. So if you're not getting it from your side angles, if you need to move, that's totally fine. But when the light is flat, okay, like we started talking about yesterday, it's even on our face. Remember I used the ring light example, okay? In order to broad and short light, we need to light from the side, okay? In relation to the camera, okay? So for example, if I'm the subject and I turn and I face square to this light, I'm still technically not flat lit because the camera is over there. So to the camera, it's not flat light, it's still side light. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So here's step number 2, what you need to understand for broad and short lighting. Just how we said with the rectangle example, right? There's a short side and a broad side, okay? When I look straight into the camera right now, in theory, okay, I'm not gonna get out like a ruler and measure, but in theory, the way the camera sees, my nose is equidistant between both of the sides of my face, or my ears, right? So the distance between my nose to here is the same as the distance from my nose to here. Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay? If I turn my face, those distances change to the camera. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay? So now the distance from my nose to here is shorter than the distance from my nose to here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good. So what that basically is to use the rectangle example again, if I turn my nose this way, okay, we're doing this with that box. So this is the short side of my face, because from my nose to here is shorter. This is the broad side of my face, just like this is the broad side of the rectangle. Okay? So when we light, remember our eye goes to the lightest part of the photo, okay? And basically now that we're introducing lighting into our process, our exposure triangle is now becoming an exposure square. Okay? Because we can control the amount of light and the brightness in a photo, we can control our exposure by changing our ISO, by changing our shutter speed, by changing our aperture, and by adding external light to that scene. So now there's 4 different ways that we can control exposure in a photo. Does that make sense? Good. The cool thing about adding light and starting to control things that way is we don't have to control, or we don't have to add light to the entire scene, right? All of those triangle settings, aperture, ISO, shutter speed, those affect the whole image. We call those global settings, okay? But when we light a part of a scene, you guys know this from light painting, you don't have to light the whole thing, okay? You can control what part you want to light, what part you don't want to light, okay? So for example, there's a background behind me right now, yes? If I put the light like this, you see the background probably darker than my face, right? If we put the light like this, okay, that background appears to be a little bit brighter to the camera because there's more light falling on it. If I put the light like this, that background could get darker, right? Because there's not as much light directly falling on the background, okay? And we could go as far as taking this up like this. Now that background's gonna almost look black to the camera, right? Because there's probably no light or very little light falling on that, but there's a lot of light falling on the subject. Photographers use this all the time. They wanna isolate or emphasize their subject rather than having them get lost or visually distracted, the viewer's visually distracted by the background, okay? There's another tangent, sorry, broad and short. When your subject's face is towards the light, that is called short lighting, because it lights the short side of their face, and this broad side back here falls off into shadow, okay? So to your eye, as a viewer, and theater utilizes this all the time, right? To your eye, if it's not lit, it doesn't really exist. Like, you know that I have the back of my head, right? But you're not paying attention to it because all your focus is here. You guys ever watch Grey's Anatomy?
Yeah.
They use this lighting all the time. This is not how hospitals light in real life, right? Hospitals light is very even, okay? But if you watch Grey's Anatomy or other shows that have like a sense of drama to them, right? Typically not like sitcoms, but shows that are a little bit more serious, a little bit more dramatic, they often light using short lighting techniques because creates deeper shadows, creates more sense, a more dramatic feel, but it's also very, very flattering. It lights the most thin, most slim part of your face, and it makes the wide part of your face just kind of visually disappear, okay? Now we can do the same thing with the body, okay? And this is where if you ever look at like 80s, 90s, early 90s glamour shots, this is like the pose, okay? This is the broad part of your subject's body, right? This is the short part of the body. Okay, now there's a short joke in there somewhere about my whole body is short, but that's okay. So we want to light, in order to make somebody look thinner, okay, we want to light the short part of their body. So you turn their shoulders away from the light, okay? So now only this part is lit, the rest of this is going to fall off into shadow. We turn their head, right now my head is broad lit, okay? We turn their head back towards the light. Is this pose starting to ring a bell?
Yep.
Okay? And then, if you want to go into posing, which is a few lessons down the road here, okay, you have them angled towards the camera, because remember, what is closer to the camera appears larger, right? So now their head is closer to the camera, the rest of their body is now farther away, so it's going to appear smaller. That's where that kind of very stereotypical glamour shots pose, okay, came from, because of short and broad lighting, okay? So, does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, If it does, good job, because I did not learn short and broad lighting until well after college. Okay, and even then I like struggled to really grasp it. It's kind of a tough concept. Okay, if you want to make somebody look powerful, are you going to short light them or broad light them? Why?
More of them, more short.
More of them will show up. It's going to make them appear larger. It's going to make them appear more dominant, right? If somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, I don't want you to take my picture because I always look fat in pictures," you're going to short light them, okay? And then you're going to show them the back of the camera and you're going to say, "Here, you do not always look fat in pictures, right? It's just that people were improperly lighting you." Okay? You wouldn't really say that. Don't just but that's the point. You need to be able to show people what you can do, okay? There's a lot you can do to sculpt with the light. Okay? It's a cool thing as an artist and as a photographer to be able to control. Okay? Something else is, now right now I'm just lighting from the front. Okay? If you were in musical, right, we did some headshots for that and we had a light in the front and then we also had a light coming from the back. Anybody know why we would do that? What did we say happens if I'm being short lit right now? What happens to the rest of my broadside?
It disappears.
It disappears. Okay? So especially if you've got a dark background, okay, a strong portrait, you're going to be able to kind of see, okay, unless it's real artistic or real stylistic or something like that, where you really only want like a sliver of somebody to show, you kind of need to see where the rest of their body is, right? Just even the outline. We want to create some sort of separation. So if we use another light, I hope this is plugged in.
I think it is, 'cause I think that's the one that we were laughing at.
That is laughing at this light.
Yeah.
By the way, these are sandbags, and I forgot to mention this yesterday, but you want to use sandbags to weigh down, sorry, you want to use sandbags to weigh down the bottom of your light stand so that it doesn't fall over, okay? Because if somebody were to knock into it, which happens from time to time, that can be a really detrimental thing for lights falling on the ground. So, especially these like smaller, flimsier stands, you want to use your sandbags. And especially if you're about to stretch the cord out in a mostly unsafe way like I'm about to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Do what she says, not as she does. I also learned a trick, actually at Shutterfest this year, where, see this cord isn't very long. If you had a longer cord and it was on the ground, you would want the cord to go under the foot of your light stand. I never knew this. I always thought like, oh, get it out of there because you don't want it to like pull over your light stand. No. If you put the cord under the foot, then if somebody trips over your cord, they'll pull from the bottom of the light stand rather than pulling from the top and making your whole stand fall down. Isn't that brilliant? Thank you, Paul Pruitt. Okay. So here's another light.
Exposed.
Okay. I am backlighting. Can you guys just move a little bit so I can see myself in the mirror? That would help me a lot. Thank you. Okay, so do you see what's happening now? I'm lighting that broad side, but this light is not as bright as this one, especially if I stand over this way more. Okay? So I'm not going to get into lighting ratios. That's like way complicated for you guys. Lighting ratios basically says which light is brighter and by how much. If you're a drawing and painting student, we talk about proportions and things that are twice as big, and you can get twice as bright and things like that in light. Okay, I'm not going to get into that. I don't care if you know that or not. The point is, you use this to create some separation back there. Okay, and you can take this down if this is too bright. You know, put something in front of it. I didn't talk to you guys about reflectors yet or scrims, but we have we have some collapsible reflectors in the computer lab. So you can do that. You can use, instead of a light back here, you could hold, is there a white sheet just hanging out somewhere? Probably not. No.
Wait in the mirror.
Yes, there we go. Okay, so watch this. If you didn't have a second light, come over here. It just appears. Hold that like that. Okay. So watch this. If you didn't have a second light, you could hold it like that. Okay. It just appears. Come back. Hold that like that. Okay. Hold that like that. Okay. Okay. So watch this. If you didn't have a second light, you could hold it like that. Okay. Do you see what's happening now?
Yeah.
Okay, hold that sheet down for a second. Now hold it back up. Now look at this side of my face. Do you see the difference? Hold it down. Hold it up.
It's lighter.
So this is bouncing light from here back into my face. It's not going to be as light as this, because the light over time and distance is going to lose some intensity, right? We can talk about the inverse square law, but we're not going to get into that either. Okay, but the idea is it's going to help that not be so dramatically dark that you're losing stuff. Okay, and you can play around with the angle of that too. Now, thank you. You can put that down. This is just a white sheet, right? Remember I said light is light. You can use whatever. Okay, you could do this with white piece of paper. You could do it with white poster board. You could do it with a pillow. I use pillows all the time when I'm doing wedding details in a hotel room on the day of somebody's wedding. Okay. You can also, on some of the reflectors we have, they have a silver metallic side. So how is that going to change the light compared to white? It's going to be brighter, okay? It's also going to be what we call more specular, which basically means that if you think of like how a flashlight beam works, it's really bright in the middle, and then as it gets to the outside, it gets dimmer. That's what specular light is, okay? The opposite of specular would be diffused, which would be like from a white source, where it's more even all the way across, more like a spotlight. Okay, so does that make sense? If you understand specular and diffusion, you're already way ahead of where I was at your age, okay? Because I didn't learn that till after college either. Questions on broad and short. While we're at it, questions on hard and soft. Okay, in Google Classroom, you guys have an assignment. It's a document. You are going to look for portrait images. Okay, I can't remember how many, but it's clearly outlined in that document. You're going to copy and paste examples of those portrait images into where it says to. Then you're going to evaluate those images. You're going to say, is it hard or soft light? Where is that light coming from? Okay, now some of them, like we just talked about, some of them might have multiple light sources. So you're going to have to determine which one is the dominant light source or the key light. Hint, it's usually the one from the front. Okay, but is it front left? Is it front right? Camera left, camera left, camera right, okay? Is it backlit, right? So you're gonna have to determine, is it hard or soft, which direction it's coming from, and is it broad or short light, okay? And again, in the situation of multiple light sources, you're only referring to the key light, the dominant light. So I can be lit from both sides, but I'm still, if I'm going this way, if this is my dominant light, am I broad or short lit? Short. Does that make sense? Any questions? I'm trying to remember what else I'm forgetting, but yet go fast. I think we're good. Okay, good job everybody. Great.